Shir lamalot, esaina el harim, me'ayin yavo Ezri, Ezri, me'im ladonai, oseh shamayim v'aretz. Al yiten lamod raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha, yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, Yishmor et nafshecha, Adonai, Yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. The words of Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, creator of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, and your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard your life, your going and your coming, now and forever.
Welcome, and thank you so much for being here on this sad day. We have the opportunity and the obligation and the really hard job of saying goodbye to someone who made a really big difference in this community and in his family. And as we think about Bob Cohn today, we have the chance to help his beautiful family say goodbye. We have the chance to say goodbye ourselves. We have the chance to lift up a legacy that is pretty huge. And as I only really got to meet Bob later in his life, I didn't know that he was also so physically huge because I had only ever seen him sitting. And then I learned that he was enormous in stature, in height, in love, in openness, in personality, and in creating truly a most beautiful story over the last 87 years. I'm Rabbi Emily Hyatt.
Rabbi Elizabeth Sachs.
And it's really an honor for us to be here with you on this day. Very briefly before we begin, if you have not yet silenced your cell phones, we ask you to do so. Please note that all four corners of this sanctuary are exits that will take you directly outside. There are restrooms, including accessible restrooms, straight out those doors and to the right at the end of the hallway. And essentially, there's three parts of a funeral, of a Jewish funeral. The first thing that we do is prepare ourselves for the incredibly hard work of saying goodbye. We do that with the words of our liturgy and our tradition, our psalms, and the tradition that lives deeply in our hearts as we prepare for this hard task of saying goodbye. The second thing we do is to tell the story of Bob's life, a story that we can only tell now that we know how it ends. And then the third thing that we do is to say goodbye to his physical presence with us here. And so we begin with words of liturgy.
When someone we love passes away, we use the words of Psalm 23 to bring us comfort in this moment. There are many reasons why the words of this psalm are particularly moving and appropriate, but on this day in particular, we think about two. First and foremost, this psalm sets up the idea of a beautiful, peaceful place. And that is surely where Bob's spirit deserves to be. We know that the last few weeks have not been easy. We know that you as family have cared for him tremendously, and we know that all you desperately want is for him to rest and to be calm. And so we thank the psalm for that image. And the other piece is that in the middle of this psalm, it says these famous words, Gam ki elech begetz al mavet, even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And as this family knows so well, we have to walk through this moment. As hard as it is, as much as it is unwelcome, we cannot sit in it. And so we're going to do that together, not only with the family that surrounds you, but with this greater family that is here for you. And so we turn to the words of Psalm 23. Adonai roi lo echsar binot asher yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenaleni nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek yancheni v'maglei tzedek lemon shemo gam ki elech begetz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni ha'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya achtof chesed yedefuni kol yemei chayai kol yemei chayai v'shavti bevei Adonai leyorech yamim Adonai roi lo echsar Adonai roi lo echsar Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name, and even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you, God, are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
Every time we stand up here or we stand at a grave and we think about how we, as clergy, have the chance to lift up truly the soul of someone who matters greatly. We think about which are the poems and which are the psalms and which are the songs that we will use to help bring comfort to a family and to help really represent the identity of a person that we are trying to capture. And so I want to share with you words that I think perhaps are very true to Bob. This is an excerpt from a letter from George Washington that he wrote to his friend Benjamin Franklin, knowing that for Bob, I think history was a language and perhaps also a tradition and something for which we have enormous opportunity to learn. And so this is what George Washington said. He said, "If to be venerated for benevolence, if to be admired for talents, if to be esteemed for patriotism, if to be beloved for philanthropy can gratify the human mind, you must have the pleasing consolation to know that you have not lived in vain. And I flatter myself that it will not be ranked among the least grateful occurrences of your life to be assured that, so long as I retain my memory, you will be thought on with respect, veneration, and affection by your sincere friend." We don't write like this anymore. What a tribute to a friend that George Washington got to tell Benjamin Franklin that he made a difference. And if it makes a difference to know after your life that you're being thought of, that your memory is making a difference, that the work that you did in your life has changed people, perhaps even for the better, then Benjamin Franklin can know that as long as George Washington retains his memory, he will be thought of. A beautiful tribute and a testament to two very beautifully smart people who just cared deeply about each other. And so in this moment, I invite you to turn not just to the words of our tradition and history, but also to the words and thoughts and memories in your own hearts. We always have a lot of words, but for the moments where we don't have enough or the right or even words at all to make a difference, we know that what is in our hearts, for those of you who knew Bob, that can think of him and know that that makes a difference, and for those of you who didn't know Bob but knew some member of his family and knew how special he must have been to have created these people, we'll think on him in a moment of silence.
One of the things that has become a piece of the stories that we have heard about Bob over these last few days and weeks is that while we can acknowledge that he was giant in many ways, the other word that came out most strongly was gentle. There was such a gentleness to his bigness. That is a very special combination. And we think about that sometimes when we are trying to decide how we pray most sincerely. And in just a moment, we're going to sing these words of Oseh Shalom, which ask so deeply for peace, both gently and quietly, but also with the idea that this is the biggest idea we can possibly hope for there to be peace and justice and rightness in the world. And we know that just as Bob never stopped learning and never stopped trying to find the things that were the most right in the world, so too do we never stop asking for this, even when it feels the hardest, even when it feels hopeless. We take comfort and inspiration from who he was and how he lived to find ways to just keep asking. Oh, say shalom. Imromav. Oh, say shalom. Imromav. Uyase, uyase, uyase shalom. Uyase, uyase, uyase shalom. Uyase, uyase, uyase shalom. Allene. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. Oh, say shalom. Bimroma. Oh, say shalom. Bimroma. Uyase, uyase, uyase shalom. Uyase, uyase, uyase shalom. Uyase, uyase, uyase shalom. Allene. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace
with those words of peace really in our hearts, we turn now to the story of Bob's life. And what we know at the moment, amongst all of the other pieces of the puzzle that we hold, is that he was born May 24th, 1938. He died February 22nd, 2026. And in between those two dates, when we think about the sum of a person's life, there's often this tiny little dash. Date of birth, dash, date of death. And in that dash is 87 years, is one very beautiful and wonderful wife, 2 children, the families they have built, siblings, cousins, a legacy, an incredible career, a community, and thousands of memories. And so today we start the project, which is unfinishable, beginning to understand what is in that dash in between those two dates, and being able to hold the pieces of a great man that will help us to not only know his legacy, but to live it and to carry it forward. And so this morning, we will hear first from Bob's son, Rich, and then via a representative from Bob's grandson, Avi, and his granddaughter, Sydney. And so I'm going to invite Rich up to begin.
Thank you, rabbis. I was just thinking I wasn't expecting to be up here speaking until maybe mid-September. But I guess my dad wanted me to have some practice. How tall are you? How tall are you? This was invariably one of the first questions, if not the first question someone would ask my dad when they met him. I think as everybody knows by now, my father was an unusually tall man, especially a Jewish man. He was 6 feet 7 inches tall. And I suspect that he started getting this question in his teens, and it continued throughout his adult life. And somewhere along the way, whether it was simply to amuse himself or to humor the person asking and put them at ease, he started answering the question, "How tall are you?" with, "I'm 5'19". His response always got a laugh, and it no doubt put that person at ease. There were certainly benefits to having such a tall father growing up. We always had the best aisle seats at any sporting event, concert, or theater. We always got the exit row with the extra leg room on airplanes. And I never got lost in a department store. A tall father had its drawbacks, though, too. We could never sit in a booth at a restaurant. His legs wouldn't fit. And we always had the biggest car in the neighborhood. Although when I was 15 years old, my dad decided that he wanted a sports car. I was, of course, really excited, but skeptical. So he and I went to whatever sports car dealership it was, and my dad picked out the car he liked. And I remember thinking, this may actually happen. But when the salesperson opened the door of the car and asked my dad to sit in, I knew it was over. He barely got one leg in, and we had to help him out. He stood, and off we went to the Buick dealership down the street. But my dad was not defined by his height. He was defined by so many of his wonderful qualities. First, my dad was defined by his passion for education. He, of course, went to college and earned an undergraduate degree. But after college, my dad went on to earn 2 master's degrees and a law degree. And I'm sure at times my grandparents thought my dad would be nothing more than a professional student. Almost, but no. He chose a career in education and made education his life's work. He loved U.S. history, the Civil War era in particular. When my son Avi was in middle school and high school, he and my dad would have conversations at dinner talking about what Avi was learning in his history classes. Those conversations brought my dad so much joy. My dad was also defined by his work ethic. In college at CU, for example, my dad would come home every weekend instead of partying with his fraternity brothers to work in my grandparents' dry cleaning store so he had money to pay for his tuition. Throughout most of his professional career, my dad had kept 2 jobs, practicing law and teaching as an adjunct professor at DU at night. He worked until he was 81 years old when his health began to decline. My dad's work ethic profoundly impacted me. I've never thought I was the smartest person in the room, especially at home with my wife. But inspired by my dad's example, I always thought that if I worked hard, I would never fail. My dad was defined by how much he valued his family. He was an extraordinary husband, father, and grandfather. My parents were married for over 63 years, and he absolutely adored my mom. He loved buying her presents, jewelry in particular. He relied on my mom as much as she relied on him. Theirs was a true loving partnership. My dad was affectionate and caring, even in the last several months when his mind was failing and he didn't feel well. When my dad was at the nursing care or rehab facilities the past couple of months, there were times when he didn't talk much. He seemed almost vacant. But then he would reach out his hand to hold my mom's hand as if to comfort her, knowing how overwhelmed she felt. Most evenings, I would come to pick up my mom, and I would tell my dad I was taking her home. And he always would say, "Good, please take care of her. She deserves it." As a father, I can only simply say my dad was present, physically and emotionally. Whatever I was doing, my dad was supportive, encouraging, and invested. He took so much joy in making sure I was happy. He was a diehard Bronco fan, and he started taking me to Broncos games when I was about 5 years old. We sat in the south stands, on the aisle, of course. One of my greatest sports memories, and really one of my greatest life's memories, was when the Broncos beat the Oakland Raiders in the AFC Championship game in 1977 to go to the Super Bowl for the first time. I was 9 years old, and my dad had taken me to the game. And at the end of the game, it was pandemonium. Fans rushed the field and tore down the goalposts in the south end zone. My dad saw that people were passing the goalposts up the south stands. And in the craziness of it all, he bent down and he yelled, "I'm going to put you on my shoulders. When the goalpost passes, reach up and touch it. You'll remember this for the rest of your life." I did, of course, and it was absolutely thrilling. I never really knew if my dad had more joy because the Broncos won or because he saw how excited I was to touch the goalpost. As loving as my dad was, he also could be a firm disciplinarian, or at least he tried to be. Again, when I was 9 years old, my parents took us on a trip to Washington, D.C. always the lover of U.S. history, my dad had booked multiple 10-hour days touring the monuments and the museums. In one evening, we had a tour of the Library of Congress. There was a pretty large group of people on our tour. As we stood in the rotunda outside the main room of the library, our tour guide said we would be going inside and that everyone needed to be very, very quiet. As he said this, my 9-year-old self broke wind, loud enough for most in our group to hear. Almost everyone laughed, but my dad was furious. He grabbed my elbow, and all 519 of him dragged me out to the exterior hall. As he bent down to yell at me, he couldn't help himself, and he burst out laughing. There was nothing left for him to do but rejoin our group. In truth, my dad actually could be very firm. Honesty was an unbreakable rule in our house. If you lied, there was trouble. I missed my curfew twice as a teenager, my first and last time. And when it happened, I tried to sneak in the house so my dad wouldn't know. But he was sitting on the steps up to my room when I came in the house, and in his most stern voice, all he said was, "We'll talk about this in the morning." We never did talk about it because he knew my worrying all night was punishment enough. My dad was the cool dad. He was friends with all of my friends. When I was in BBYO, my friends wanted to be at our house to hang with my dad. When I hosted our AZA chapter poker games, my dad would sit in and play. He loved it, and my friends loved it. When I went to college, my dad and I still talked almost every day. He was always so proud and never hesitated to express it. I went to Israel for my junior year, and we could only talk once a week. Those were the days when there were no cell phones and long-distance calling was really expensive. So to fill the void of not talking every day, my dad several times a week, every week, would go into his office in the morning and write me a letter. He wrote on those blue aerograms that folded in thirds. And by the end of my year in Israel, my dad had sent me almost 100 aerograms. My dad was a hugger and he was a kisser. Whenever we greeted each other, he always gave me a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. He was emotionally accessible. He never hesitated to say, "I love you." That's how all of our conversations ended. He taught me it was okay to be the same, to show emotion, to hug, to love openly. And in that regard, he was a tremendous role model and a great example for when I became a father. My dad absolutely adored his 2 grandchildren, Avi and Sydney. He delighted in always hearing about everything happening in their lives, and he always was overjoyed at any and all of their successes. He was as present, supportive, and invested in Avi and Sydney as he was as a father. Perhaps most significantly, my dad was defined by his kindness. He had the warmest smile and the softest eyes that welcomed anyone. He always wanted to make sure everyone around him was happy. He greeted people with the warm smile and with exuberance, and he genuinely cared about how you were doing. If you were happy, he was happy. He always had a compliment, and the compliments were sincere. Although I must say, there were times he may have been a little too quick with a compliment. My wife, Lisa, called him on it one time. Shortly after Lisa and I were engaged, we were out with my parents. Lisa was wearing some dangly earrings, nothing fancy. And when my dad greeted Lisa, he said, "Those earrings are beautiful." Lisa looked up at him and teased him, Bob, I could have turds hanging from my ears and you would tell me they were beautiful. My dad just laughed, and then he complimented the dress she was wearing. My dad was, again, an incredible role model with his kindness. He taught me it was okay to pursue your goals, push for what you want, be smart, all while being kind at the same time. Of all of my dad's wonderful qualities, it is his kindness I will miss most. I'll miss him telling all the nurses and doctors that helped him over the last few years that he felt ornery when they asked him how he was, just to make them laugh. I will miss his firm handshakes and his kind eyes when he looked at me when we greeted each other. And I will miss his warm embraces, his huge hugs he always gave me. My dad would have loved seeing so many people here today. Although if he were here, he would have tried to comfort everyone. Maybe make a few funny comments to put everyone at ease. And then he'd go try to find a seat on the aisle, of course.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I am Bob's daughter-in-law. Thank you all for being here. Avi Jack Cohn, Rich's and my son and Bob's grandson, is in Madrid for the semester. Because he can't be here today, he asked me to read this for him. Zadie. Larger than life. That's the only way to describe my Zadie, physically and emotionally. The most gentle giant of them all, Zadie always complimented me and anyone else who greeted him. He always held a genuine interest in the happenings of my life. He loved hearing about my American history classes, my thoughts on the Broncos, AZA, and anything else I might be focused on. Zadie was also the sharpest of dressers. Up until his last days in a hospice bed, he always had on a colorful dress shirt, no matter the occasion. This is where my love of style comes from. I always admired his ability to light up a room with his smile and his style. Two of my fondest memories with my Zadie came at the Kotel in Jerusalem and in the South Stands at Mile High Stadium. I will never forget our family trip to Israel in 2019 and going to the Kotel with my dad and Zadie, knowing what a special moment it was for Zadie to see his grandson take to his Judaism and have 3 generations of Cohns together at this holy site, standing together side by side and praying at the wall. At Mile High, it was 2016, and the Broncos had just won the AFC Championship against Tom Brady's Patriots to go to Super Bowl 50. I remember my dad picking me up for a picture with the two of us and Zadie. Zadie's smile once again lit up my life. While I was only a 10-year-old diehard fan, I knew how much it meant to Zadie to be there for such a significant moment with his grandson. That picture still puts a smile on my face every time I see it. When Zadie was in assisted living in the last few months, my dad needed to take my bubby out for some errands, and he asked me to keep Zadie company for a couple of hours. I was delighted to do so. Even though Zadie's memory was really fading, those 2 hours were filled with engaged conversations, just the two of us. He loved hearing about my time at Indiana University and my plans for my upcoming semester in Madrid. In those 2 hours, he asked me if I wanted to eat something at least 5 times, not because he forgot he asked, but because he always wanted to make sure the people around him were happy and comfortable. The last time I saw my Zadie, I was sitting by his hospice bedside. He briefly woke up and he saw me. He exclaimed, "Avi Jack!" again with a smile that could only fit a man of his stature. He pulled out his hand from under his blanket and gave me one last firm handshake. Zadie, I will keep smiling, keep giving firm handshakes to everyone I meet, keep living a Jewish life, and keep rooting for the Broncos with all my heart. I know our next Super Bowl win is coming soon, and when it does, in my mind, it will be for you. Thank you, Zadie, for all you gave me and this world. I love you and miss you with all my heart.
Definitely gonna need that. I got you. I did not get Zadie's height.
Thank you. All right. I want to share a quote. Develop a passion for learning. If you do, you'll never cease to grow. Anthony D'Angelo, an author and pioneer in higher education. Zadie loved to learn, and the man did he grow. Nearly 7 feet. So tall that when I was younger, he'd pick me up and nearly take my head off with the ceiling fan, and Bubby would yell, "Watch your head, Bob." In my last couple visits, we talk a lot about school, like what Avi was saying, and when I'd mention I'm getting my master's degree, he'd tell me how much he loved school and how it made him who he was today, and how proud he was of me. Education and taking care of his family was important to him. He worked his way through undergraduate, graduate, and law school. He dedicated the rest of his life to education, serving as dean, vice principal, and a lawyer, protecting and driving change for students and teachers. I've always loved learning, from languages to architecture. He loved history and tradition and government affairs. We talked for hours about what we are passionate about, teaching each other and having a good time. Oh, and reading. When I started college, we would text back and forth. He'd start everything with "Hi, Sydney," and conclude it with "Love, Bubby and Zadie," and then would indent everything, space everything so it was a proper letter. And he loved saying "wow" in all caps when I told him about my life. We'd always check in about what books we were reading. Mine about dragons and his about brave historical figures. We even read a book together, but unfortunately I don't remember the name. It was when I was much younger. But we marveled in the power of words. Words we read and spoke. He used words like a shield to protect those he cared about and those who needed his help and love. Despite living several states away, Bubby and Zadie would visit as often as they could. Camping out early before my 5th grade and middle school culmination, and every time he came out here, Zadie would take me shopping at Talbot's Kids. In fact, that has created a special bond with my mom and I going to Talbot's, and we are both dressed in Talbot's today in honor of him. Every year, the Jewish high school I attended hosted Family Day. He loved spending the day with me at school, engaging in new and old traditions with me and discussing my Jewish identity. I was a key speaker at Family Day my senior year when I gave a speech about compassion and how the smallest acts of kindness can change someone's life. I like to think that describes Zadie, always doing what was right and striving to be the best person he could through everything he learned and did. He used his knowledge and great skill to enlighten others and uplift them. I knew I always held a special place in his heart, even towards the end, and him in mine. I love you, Zadie, so much. I'll miss you, and you've made a real impact on my life.
What a story of such a man. And I gratefully have pages and pages of notes from the conversation that I got to have with Bob's family in the last couple of days. And I just want to make sure that we fill in a couple of the pieces. Bob was born here, 1938. He grew up, went through school here, went to CU, and then got his master's at UCLA, came back to Denver, was married and working when he decided he was going to go to law school, got his law degree at night. He had worked as an administrator in the Denver public schools, including North, South, TJ, and Baker Junior High. He got his JD in 1971, and then in 1977, he left the school system and began practicing labor law and school administrative law, and he did that for 25 years in private practice. After 25 years, he retired from his private practice, and then he went back and served as general counsel for the Academy School District 20 in Colorado Springs. And throughout all of that professional experience, especially in his last round at Academy, he was known as Father Bob for his excellent judgment and his very wise counsel. And when I asked, what was it like when Bob retired, I was reminded that he retired at age 81, and he died when he was 87. It wasn't very long that he had when he wasn't working, because he always wanted to be contributing, to be learning, and combining those two passions, I think, was actually sort of the key to all of it. He taught boys health and helped them learn about things that perhaps no one else was teaching them. He liked to be educated and to educate. And part of that, I think, for him meant being a really good listener, being able to engage in conversation without judgment, being able to hear and to speak and to engage without some of the disrespect that really shows up in conversation today. I also know that tradition, that being a part of a system was really important to him. I think that is part of his love for the Broncos and the Buffs, that there is tradition in that love and in that kind of support for a team. But it wasn't just sports teams, it was also being a part of Jewish community and Jewish tradition. His identity and his values really shaped so much of who he was, but not in a way that was separate in any way from who he was in the other parts of his life. He liked to learn and to teach others. He even, amongst all of the other things that he was doing, like raising a family and going to school and working, taught in the religious school at Beth Joseph for a time. He made tradition and kept tradition. The Marcus family Seders, that's his mother's maiden name, went on for 100 years. There were gatherings of that group of family in different generations and iteration. The Seder has apparently gotten blessedly slightly shorter over the years, which everybody, I think, appreciates. But that Seder and those gatherings happened for a very long time because they really mattered. Bob loved making latkes. Bob loved making horseradish. And it wasn't just because he wanted to eat them. It was the tradition of the experience that I think was critical. But truly, I don't think I have more words or better words than the words that his family shared. The words that Sydney and Avi and Rich shared really sum up who was Bob and what is the legacy that he is leaving. And so I actually want to leave you with a story. There was an old rabbi, as we tell stories in Jewish tradition, who was very old. And he was very sick, and he had been alive for a very long time. And he lay dying in his bed, and he was surrounded by his family. and his wife and his children and his grandchildren and his nurses and his doctors and his students were all gathered around his bed. And it was clear that the end of his life was approaching, but it wasn't coming, and it took a little while. And they waited and they waited, and then finally, suddenly, in the moments that they thought would be the very end of his life, this very old rabbi began to sing. And it was what we call in Jewish tradition a nigun, or a song without words. And his voice was so weak, and it was clear that his body was so tired. But he began to sing, weakly at first, but continuing. And his doctors and his nurses rushed in, and they said, "Save your strength, Rabbi. What are you doing? This is not good for you." And it was clear that it was causing such a toll on him, but he kept singing. And his wife begged him to stop and to preserve his energy. And his students who were waiting outside came, and then they combed through the pages of the books looking for what on earth was happening. And everybody was worried, and he wouldn't stop singing until finally, his children gathered around his bedside and began to sing with him. And only then did he sing one more round of the words of that nigun and then slowly stop so that they could keep singing and he could peacefully slip away. It is so clear that that is the legacy of Bob. And you know the words to exactly the kind of person he was and will continue to be for you. That you will love learning, that you will love kindness, that you will work hard, that you will teach, that you will carry on traditions that mattered so deeply to him, and that you will, each of you, all of us in our own way, lift up community, lift up family, lift up compassion and giving and listening and kindness in a way that Bob did. We know the words. And so our job is to keep singing.
With those beautiful words about Bob's legacy in our hearts, we turn now to the difficult task of saying goodbye. And so at this time, I ask you to rise as you are able for El Malei Rachamim, our memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Odorim, Kezohar Harakia Mashirim, and Nishmat, Ruvain Yisroel ben Shaya David Velka, Shehalach Leolamo, Barachamim, Yostireu Beseter Kenafav Leolamim, Bitzror HaChaim et Nishmato, Adonai Unachalato Ve'anuach Beshalom Al Mishkavo Ve'nomar of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one, Robert Irwin Cohn, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold him close to you forever, so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. And together we all say, Amen.
Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at Temple Emmanuel. We'll have interment at Emmanuel Cemetery. Well, if you'd like to join us for the interment, we do have an escorted procession, and if you'd like to join us in that procession, we'll ask you to return to your cars as quickly as possible. Start heading out towards the southeast corner of the synagogue parking lot, and please have your hazards on. That will help the escorts identify you as a participant in the procession. If you're not going to the cemetery, if we can ask you to give way to those who are, and ask you to use the northeast exit of the synagogue's parking lot. We will ask you to remain in your places as we escort the family and the casket out to the cars, and we'll also ask you to please refrain from trying to grab and express your condolences to the family. They are on a timetable. They would like to finish this process, so if you allow them to do what they need to do and get back to their cars, that'd be very much appreciated. At this time, if I can invite the pallbearers forward.
While pallbearers are coming forward, Shiva will be held at the home of Rich and Lisa Cohn, 8991 East Wesley Avenue, today directly after interment with Minyan at 6, and tomorrow beginning at 2 with Minyan at 6.
Adonai madan v'teda'eu.
Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us?
Ben enosh v'techesheveu.
What are we that you are mindful of us?
Adam lahevel dama. Yamav ketzel over.
We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow.
Baboker yatzitz v'chalaf.
We come and go like grass.
La'erev yemolel ve'yavesh.
Which in the morning shoots up renewed and in the evening fades and withers.
Tashiv daka.
You cause us to turn to dust.
Vatomer shuvu v'nei adam.
Saying, return, O mortal creatures.